truth. No chaser.
Welcome to Truth No Chaser. I'm Ashley.
And I'm Jay.
And I'm Frank.
And this is a shot of truth stirred with bold opinions, reversing the miseducation of the black community as it relates to health and politics.
Yes, and today we have special guest psychologist Dr. Govan, better known as Dr. G, with us today. And the topic today is raised in abuse, the effects and breaking the cycle. And we are going to be talking about the effects on adults who were raised in abusive homes, what causes some repeat cycles, recommendations for those who are trying to break the cycle, and identifying the mind of the abuser. But first, as always, we want to start off with our icebreaker. Yes. And yes, we have a home team type of person here. That means everything Atlanta. ATL, no more playing GA. So we got, I know you said you don't particularly root for the Falcons. However, I have two gentlemen you have to choose, and I almost know who you're going to choose. But
well, let me say this. I don't root against them.
No problem.
You know, I'm just not a big NFL person.
Okay, so we're judging off of their NFL careers alone.
Okay.
Their Atlanta Falcon careers specifically.
Ooh.
Sorry. Michael Vick.
I knew we was going with this.
Deion Sanders.
Oh, shit, didn't know.
Deion Sanders. So what most people don't know is I'm a huge Coach Prime fan. Huge Coach Prime fan.
Well, if you look at if you ever went to TikTok, you would know she's a huge Coach Prime fan. So it was a dumb question for me, but you know.
and I love Mike Vick. But okay. I'm a huge, I think he is so inspirational, you know, on what he did on the field, more so what he does off the field.
Okay. I'm gonna throw the one to Jay because he had a interesting one because you are a big UGA fan. So Jay, take it away.
All right, if you're truly the UGA fan that you say you are, you'll be able to answer this. I'm a diehard Philadelphia Eagles fan. We have lovingly taken on the name the Philadelphia Bulldogs.
Basically.
Who's your favorite Bulldog that joined the Eagles within the last 2 seasons?
Ooh. So this is the thing. My first thought was Keely Ringo because he was very instrumental in, you know, making that interception in our first, you know, championship game. You know, I love Jalen Carter. You know, I don't know if I have a favorite, but I am now I'm a Philadelphia Bulldog, right? I actually have a green Georgia Bulldog shirt.
Oh
yeah.
God!
Holy crap! I don't know how that dude dropped so far in the draft, but okay.
You guys hold on while I mute Frankie's microphone.
Yeah, that's good. No, Carter is Jalen Carter.
Yeah, he's been putting in work in preseason and training
camp. Scary. Yeah. Okay, so we're gonna stay right there, and this is the last question. This is pertaining to your profession. All right, but I'm gonna combine it. UGA could win a championship for the rest of your life, but you have to see one of these clients. You actually got 4 options. There's a D. So A, Antonio Brown. You got to see him for a year.
Lord.
You got to see one of these clients for a year. Antonio Brown, Kanye West, Donald Trump, or is it F them Bulldogs? Is the last two champions? Those back-to-backs enough? Was those back-to-backs enough for you? Because y'all win it. Y'all win a little minute. Y'all win a little minute with, you know, say if we're not winning championships, then y'all won back-to-back. But, you know, old man Stetson Bennett's out of here. All them people's out of here.
That was
good, right? That was good. So, yeah, you got to see one of those three for a year.
On the surface is a great question.
Okay.
And all my Georgia Bulldog people that are watching, they sitting there intently trying to figure out what I'm going to say. So what I'm going to say is regardless of what I decide, we're still going to win. So let's put that there. Stetson is great.
She
Arguably one of
used
the
her profession
best.
to get around.
One of the best,
She used her profession to moonwalk around that
Yo, that was
question.
the biggest
That
attempt at like a
was-
Jedi
Yes.
mind trick
Yeah,
ever.
but
Because I almost went down that whole
We was like,
way.
huh? Where?
I feel like Raleigh and Boondocks, he said it's like psychology, but in reverse. Yeah, like she just danced around that one.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yeah. So we're great at what we do. Let's be very clear about that, right? Now, if I can do anything to, add to that, I would love to, right? So to be, a team player and answer the question. Give me Antonio Brown.
Oh, Mr. CTE himself,
Yes, give me
Antonio Brown.
Yep.
Put that shit on.
The reason I say that is all three of them arguably have personality disorders, which is not curable, right?
There you go.
But what I think with Antonio Brown though, and I've actually watched him, some of his interviews on different podcasts, and so he still is.
Yeah,
he's still sane on some
intact.
level, right?
Yeah, that's good.
And
I agree with that.
And he seems to be, able to hold a conversation that's rational.
There you go.
Right.
There you go.
I think
I agree.
with the other two,
No, it's no saving them.
I
They don't
can't.
wanna
I
be
won't say
saved.
that, right? I won't say that because
save
then
them.
I'm out of a job, right?
Okay.
I think but I think part of it is you have to on some level want to be different, right? And so when you're in a situation where you feel like there's nothing wrong with you, there's nothing I can do to help.
Yeah, I got you. Understandable. Go ahead, Ash.
Go ahead.
Take it
Dr.
away.
G.
Good
That was-
one.
I'm so proud of Frankie on that question. That was a really good question. I was like, who's she gonna pick? I'm sitting there waiting, like, who's she gonna say? But kicking it off, so the effects of adults who were raised in abusive homes. I, for one, being transparent, obviously was one of those, and I'm curious for those out there watching, if you can, in your own words, because I know you like to just freestyle and flow, if you can just give us some effects of the adults who were raised in abusive homes. What would you say?
Effects. So I'll be transparent. So when I first hear the effects, I, being the scholar, I initially go to this list of, textbook symptoms, and I'm not sure that helps, right? So I really want to make sure that through this interview, I'm flowing in a way that people can really truly receive it, right? And use it so that it's conversational. So what I will say is, I think that there is a misnomer that people who grew up in abusive homes, like there's this automatic, red flag, scarlet X on them, right? And that's not actually true, right? There's research out there that shows that there are a lot of people that grew up being abused, right, and seeing abuse who never actually do abuse. So what that tells us is that a lot of times what you'll see is it's like polar opposite. You either have the people who, because they saw it so much or experienced it, won't ever do it, right? And then you have people who, because they saw it, it becomes comfortable, right? So I always use the example of follow me, because we're gonna get back to the point. My best friend growing up, she never heard her parents argue, right? And so as she got into relationships and they argued, she thought something was wrong, and so she would end the relationship. And so that was kind of a pattern throughout her dating history until she got older, and it was getting closer to time for her to get married, and she had a real conversation with her mom, and her mom said, no, me and your dad always argued. We just didn't argue in front of you. And so as she's thinking back, she realizes that there were a lot of mistakes made, a lot of, relationships that she ended unfairly, because she didn't quite understand that that's kind of the process of a relationship, right? So then when you bring that back to your question, when someone sometimes grows up in an environment where that's what they see, that becomes the norm for them. And so if they get into a relationship and that's not happening, the opposite effect happens to them, where if you're not beating me, then something's wrong, right? Because that's how I've come to understand relationships. That's how I've come to understand love and how this whole thing works. So something's wrong with you or something's wrong with me. And so what they do is they kind of manufacture that, right? So they start doing things that almost kind of lead to that, jumping in your face, pushing you, fighting you, almost, prodding you to get that effect, because that's what they have become comfortable with, and that's their understanding of how relationships work. So that really kind of hopefully displays the cycle, how we get there. How is it that someone can be in something so toxic and then continue to live through toxicity? And it's because of a level of comfort, right? Because if you're not used to seeing that, then you're not going to be comfortable with it, if that makes sense.
So if I grew up in an abusive home, I'm sorry, and I'm dating somebody and he's not yelling, he's not cussing me out, he's not hitting me, I'm gonna think something's wrong with me and something's wrong with him,
or something's wrong with the relationship. Because again, your body has really been conditioned, right? So when we talk about conditioned, it's kind of this is how your body has come to understand how men and women relate to each other. And so if that's not happening, then it starts to feel like either this is boring, or he's lame, or he he's a simp, or whatever it is, because that's my body is waiting for that response. And it actually does become in a lot of ways a chemical change in your brain and your body.
Wow, I never understood that.
Because that's how trauma works, right? So how trauma works and it is that once people experience extreme trauma, there are chemical changes that occur in your brain, right? And it alters your behavior, right? It alters your thought process. It alters how you move in the world, right? And so again, it's almost like a drug, right? My body is seeking that feeling, right? So I'm seeking this excitement, quote unquote, if you will. And if that's not happening, then I don't feel loved, because this is how my body has come to understand what love is supposed to feel like.
Is that why I've heard it not ever used by a professional? So maybe this could be true or false, but people who are used to that, like you're saying, they may feel safe, quote unquote, in a volatile relationship. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yes, because it really just boils down to so I was born in Chicago, and I use this analogy quite frequently. It becomes very, very commonplace for them. So kids who grow up in Chicago, they're used to hearing gunshots, right? They don't even flinch. Whereas most of us, we start ducking and running, right? People in Chicago, that's common. If they don't hear the gunshots, it may feel more eerie than if they do, right? So again, anytime your body starts to get conditioned to something, when it doesn't happen, that's actually when it feels weird. Whether we think it's healthy or unhealthy, it feels weird to you. And then what happens is people try to make it happen. We seek out people that can simulate that feeling.
Yeah, that's crazy when you say that. As soon as you, because the scene from Hardball popped in my head since it was based in Chicago when they're walking home from baseball practice and the gunshots go off, you're like Glock 40.
Yep.
And they're not even running in that's an AK.
Desensitized, very desensitized, right? And so so again we start to seek that out.
Got you. So the symptoms or signs of adults that's raised in abusive homes, right? Is it common? Do everybody have symptoms? Does everybody have symptoms or signs that shows the way you can kind of pick up on it easily, or some not just so obvious, or
Right. So let me make sure I understand the question.
Yes.
Are we're talking about symptoms of a person who grew up in an abusive home, or are we talking about symptoms of the abuser?
Of an adult that was, let's talk about both.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
So it varies, right? So I really want to educate people on mental health, right? So when you think about mental health, I really want you to equate it to physical health, where you can have a disorder from a physical health standpoint And 10 people can all have the same disorder, but they may not all have the same symptoms, right? So if I come in and I'm telling the doctor I have a headache, right, and I have this and I have that, like that could be it could be a lot of things, right? And so we, so for the purposes of really, wanting to make sure that the listeners can receive it, I don't know that it would be helpful. Y'all Google symptoms, which I really caution against doing so, right? Because that's a very dangerous.
You start Googling stuff,
listen,
and please.
You start having all.
You'd be like, I'm a dodgeball.
If I had $1 for every time I got a call about somebody being bipolar, schizophrenic, all kind of stuff, just because you Googled it, right?
That's actually like, I got that.
Right.
But
it's like anything else, right? I always say women who ovulate versus women who are pregnant. The symptoms are very similar, right? And so, but if you're not a trained professional, you may get yourself all worked up for nothing. So with symptoms, I think the thing about it is I want people to really look at healthy versus unhealthy. When you find yourself in a situation where you are frequently anxious, worried, right? You don't feel emotionally safe. And what I mean by emotionally safe means I'm scared to say this for fear of how it is received and then what the response will be, right? I am afraid to really truly be who I am, right? Or there's certain aspects of myself that I feel like I need to hold back because this individual might use it against me, right? So to me, those are all signs that I'm not in an emotionally safe environment, whether that's romantically or anything else, right? And so for me, that's what I want people to really get from this is really taking a look at, being more in tune with yourself and understanding who you are so that you can see when there's something different about you. We spend so much time focused on the other person. I literally just said this to a client earlier. We're spending so much time talking about him and what he did and what he didn't do, right? We can't change him. What would be a better use of our time is focusing on you, where you are. Is this what you want? Are you getting fulfilled from this situation, right? Are you healthy? Are you happy? Because if those answers are no, now we need to talk about where do we go from here, right? So for me, it's always going to be encouraging people to kind of look at their situation individually, not look at the other person, but where are you, right? Do you feel safe physically? Do you feel safe emotionally and mentally? And if the answer is no, then we got a problem.
That's loaded right there.
Right.
Say more about that when you say it's loaded.
Say more about that.
Uh-oh.
Okay. All right. So we're talking about. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Jay.
That was a question, or was
That was a question.
That was a question
to you.
Yeah, I think
you said. What?
You said that's loaded. So say more about what you mean.
I'm sorry.
When you say it's loaded.
I'm sorry. When I say it's loaded, that was a lot of layers. A lot of layers. To unfold, like you said. Two symptoms could look the same, but so you just pretty much broke down the various ways and which can affect the individual. You understand what I'm saying? So like I mean, I didn't think that was going to be an easy question, but the way you just broke it down, that's what I meant by that was a loaded answer, I should have said.
Thank you. And the only reason I asked you to say more about it is because knowing people who are listening, just wanted to make sure that it's clear, right? And that's my goal tonight, is to make sure that this conversation is it's so clear that a 17-year-old could understand it, right?
Gotcha.
So,
and I can say, I can relate to when he said it was, it felt loaded because like it was like it's more layers than we expected. Usually, when you go back to those of us most of us listening aren't, or participating or listening in this conversation aren't professionals. So generally, when we look at abuse, we approach it from a one-dimensional mindset, like symptom, thing,
right,
match. Like we play it like a matching game. So that was the thing that was like, it's not only is it not necessarily about a matching game, But two people that went through the same thing could look like two different things.
Totally different.
But then not only that, I could get lost in trying to find what it is in somebody else, but not really understanding why I'm responding to certain things.
Jay, you hit the nail on the head. Honestly,
Right.
it's just the way we're programmed today, right? Everything is just so this or that.
It's a checklist.
You understand what I'm saying?
Nothing gray.
Is this or that? So whenever we do ask a question, we're just expecting the answer to be,
Black or white.
well,
This is
it's
it.
gonna be like this,
Yeah.
or we're gonna go this way, and I guess everything feels loaded once there's a bevy.
Yeah.
You know.
You know, my people who know me say I live in gray, right? So I believe 80% of the world is gray. Very few things are black and white numbers, right? 1 + 1 is 2 in every country in the world, right? But very few things are black and white, meaning it's either this or that. And so once we really, challenge our thought process to get out of this black or white thinking, we're actually healthier. Because a lot of it is if this, then that, multiplied by 2 and divide by 3, and then I might get something subtracted by 10, right? That's life, right? So challenge me tonight if my answers do feel not as direct, because again, for me, doing this as long as I've been doing it 16 years, it looks different. Everybody who sits across from me, it looks different. For me, while I have to have a knowledge of, checklists and symptoms, it's always going to be about how is it impacting that person, because that's the biggest issue, is the impact that it has on that person, if that makes sense.
Everything makes perfect sense. Yes, ma'am. All right.
So one of the points we wanted to hit was what causes some of the symptoms to repeat, or the causes the issue to repeat. And I think you touched on it pretty much, where is if you're dating somebody, I kind of asked the question and we're not arguing, he's not hitting me, it's not abusive, then something's wrong with it. To me, it's not healthy because he's not doing this thing. So is that what would cause somebody to continue to repeat the same thing over and over again? Because to them, that's healthy.
So have you all heard of, like self-sabotage, right?
Mm-hmm. I'm guilty.
So where does that come from? It really comes from what Ashley was talking about, is when things start to feel too good or maybe different. Now I'm looking for something something's got to be wrong. Why? Because I'm so used to something being wrong, right? I'm so used to things going left that I can't really sit in and fathom the fact that this could not go left. So in some ways, I start to poke the bear, if you will. I start to make something be wrong. I start to look, the lens through which I look, right, is very cloudy. And so so whatever this person did is wrong. And so that's kind of, that really does speak to that cycle too, because it doesn't always manifest itself in someone being in a relationship that is physically abusive, right? But I'm uncomfortable because there's nothing, quote unquote exciting, if you will, going on. So I have to go looking for something. And the thing about it is, I hate cliches, but one is right. When you go looking, you'll find. And not because you actually found something legit, but because you made it legit, right? You made it something. So I think that's part of the cycle, is that the unhealthy brain of abuse makes you feel like something has to go wrong. And so now I'm going to go manufacture a problem.
So, in terms, just staying with this, right? Why do some people choose to enter abusive relationships?
So I think the question may be worded, misworded, right? I don't know that anybody goes into it and says, sign me up, pick me, right? Initially. It's not as, people are not as self-aware as that, right? I think, once they get into a relationship, there's a lot of different factors that take place, right? One thing about it is it mainly it does start psychologically, mentally, emotionally, right? Like I've said before, if you meet someone and within 72 hours they slap you, most of us we're gonna walk away, right? Because this ain't worth it. So most people who physically abuse don't start off physically abusing you. You know, they start off capturing your mind. The brain is the most powerful thing on your body, right? The brain is the only thing that you cannot get another one of. You can get lungs, you can get a heart, you can get all kind of transplants, but once your brain is gone, once your brain dead, you're gone, right? So if someone can live rent free in your brain, if they can get inside your head and have you change the way you think about yourself, then I got you. And now I can do anything to you, right? So really it's really subtle. So I know these days one of the things that really kind of gets up under my skin is all these terms that get thrown around: love bombing, and some of the
love bombing.
love bombing.
Okay.
Yeah, and some of the other terms. I really want people to understand this. First of all, love bombing is not a clinical term. It's not a diagnostic term.
Wait, what is it? I never
What is-
heard
what-
of
yeah,
it.
what is
So
love bombing?
love bombing is a term that people are using a lot these days. And so the essence of love bombing is that someone starts out being all in, just showering you with all type of gifts, calling you all the time, wanting to spend all this time with
The representative.
Yeah.
Okay.
But on 10. Right,
representative, but on 10.
right?
Okay.
And so, because what happens a lot of times is, like, again, you fall in love with the representative, right?
Yes.
And so, if this person starts out the first 30 to 60 days and they're just, the goal is to show you something you haven't seen before, right? I'm taking you on trips. I'm texting you, all day long. I'm complimenting you like you're the best thing that ever happened to me. All this, right? So then once I have got you, right? Now there's buy-in. Now I'm feeling like, oh, I've never experienced anything like this before. This guy must really love me. I've been looking for this all my life, right? So now, because it's really a manipulation tool, right? So now I can almost do anything, because what happens is now my body is still chasing that feeling that you gave me the first 60 days. And because in my mind I seen you do it, I start to believe that you can do it again. And so now I'm trying to figure out, what do I need to do to get you to get back to that feeling, right? So I'm more willing to put up with all of this crap because I'm chasing a high. I'm chasing that feeling, right? And what most people don't get is that's very manipulative. It's very manipulative. It's really controlling. I always say that there are a lot of men out there that know how to get a woman but don't know how to keep a woman, right? And so that's really synonymous with this description, right? I know everything I need to do the first 90 days to get you. And once I have you, I have not a clue what to do going forward, right? And so, that's, again, it's another tactic as it relates to abuse, right? And there's so many that people do. But for me, the most powerful abuse tactics are emotional and psychological, because again, your bones will heal, right? My black eye will go down, right? I can take some Tylenol and it might not hurt as bad, but those words live rent free in my brain. I'm steady hearing it over and over, that I'm not enough, I'm not good enough, what I'm not doing another woman will, whatever it is that is being said, that's being played in my mind over and over. And the danger is if I actually believed that about myself before you said it. And so now I have connected to something, and I believe it's so because I already believed it before you ever said it. Or maybe I told you that in the past I've struggled with these things, and then you turn around and you use that against me, right? And so for me, it always starts, and for most of us, it always starts from a psychological, mental, or emotional abuse before it ever gets physical.
And that, just to echo, we had our guest last year. Shout out to Lanita Brinson. And for me, it was like I told you earlier, I was like, I wanted to talk about domestic abuse and like the physical abuse part of it. And I didn't realize until she started talking, even you kind of echo what she said as well, is it's the domestic, a bone will heal, a black eye will heal, but the words, they linger on. And she definitely echoed that last year when she had us on, we had her on the show, I'm sorry, and she hit that home, I'm sorry, for us, all of us. Was like, it's not the domestic part, not the physical part.
It's not the physical part.
It's the emotional part that really got to her, and the verbal got to her.
Because again, most of us, if you hit me within the first so many days, like I'm gonna leave. Like, I mean, but if you capture my brain, right? If you get me to believe that, one, you love me, right?
Yeah.
If you get me to believe that you're doing something from me that no other person has ever done, right? And part of that, there becomes an isolation process too, because abusers want you to start isolating from other people. And what's really dangerous is your supporters start getting frustrated, because we can see it, right? We can all we're watching this train approach this brick wall at 100 miles per hour. And I've known people who say, I cannot stand by and watch it.
Yeah.
And that's actually one of the most dangerous things a supporter can do, because once the abuser can isolate this individual from everybody else, he or she has them, because now I have nowhere else to go, right? I have no one else to call. I have no one else who wants to listen, and so I'm stuck here. And so that's part of it too, is to get inside your head, to isolate. So where the physical abuse becomes really powerful is when they say, if you leave me, I'll kill you. Well, because he's beat you so bad, you actually believe that is the case, right? So again, it doesn't start physical. It that's where it ends. That's kind of like how they seal the deal. That's how they get you to stay, is the fear that you will actually kill me. And because I've seen you beat me almost within an inch of my life, I believe that that's a possibility.
So then now let's segue that into what you would recommend for people who are trying to break that cycle. Let's start with the abuser first.
So let me start here. A lot of times when people ask me about relationships and we talk about healthy relationships, I always start with the individual. And this is the thing. Sometimes a lot of us are ready for a relationship. Or no, let me say that. A lot of us want a relationship, right? For whatever reason. We all have our reasons why we want a relationship. What I've come to realize is not everybody is really ready for one. And so before we even get to what happens once I get into an abusive relationship, I really want to talk about before you get to the relationship, right? Because again, there's some things that we all need to heal. Because those things unhealed make you more susceptible to being in an abusive relationship. When I'm struggling with who I am as a person, when I'm struggling with really truly understanding my worth, identifying it and really standing on it and walking in that truth, then I'm more susceptible to being with someone who is abusive, right? When I feel like I need something to complete me, that I'm not enough in and of myself, right? All of those things are the perfect storm for an abuser. Abusers, they're very, very intelligent, right? When you think about people, we talk about narcissists, and we're going to get there. But when you think about people like John Wayne Gacy, people who those were some of the most intelligent men to walk the planet, right? And so they have this innate ability to see things. They pick out certain people because they know, right, that she's more likely to tolerate this. And part of that is whatever you give off, right? There's certain things that they'll say to you just to see how you're going to react, right? And when you don't react or you do react, then they realize, oh, okay, like she's one of them. So one of the biggest things that we can do to prevent some of this from happening is really making sure that we work on ourselves. We really taking time to understand what it means to truly love myself, right? People say that because it sounds good, but they don't really know what that really means, right? And so I think that it's so important for people to be, self-aware, right? And have insight into the things that they do well, but equally important to understand where I struggle, right? And because again, that's where we are our most vulnerable, is where we struggle. So I think that's where I would start, is before we even get into these relationships. I think people need to take some time to work on themselves. Now, in the event that you are currently in a relationship, one of the things that we always say is, if you feel safe, right? Because again, there are a lot of people out there that are in situations where it's not safe for them to leave. I need people to understand domestic violence is really hard to understand, because most people who don't do this line of work, they're like, well, why don't they just leave? Why don't they just, call the police? Why don't they just get a restraining order, right? And I'm going to answer that. But the first thing I'm going to say is, humans do easy. We do things that are easy, right? When you take a math test, you go into all the problems that were easy. 1 + 1, right? 2 × 2. We save all the hard stuff for the end. So if something was just that easy, I need you guys to understand they would do it. So when you see someone struggling to do something, it's important to understand that for them, it's not just that easy. So just to say, just leave, it's not helpful, right? So it's not always safe, right? So if you are, or you feel like you're safe, it hasn't gotten to a place where you feel like your life is at stake, or your life is being threatened, right? I really want to encourage you to pay close attention to how you feel when you're with this person. I was talking to a colleague of mine earlier, and we were laughing about some of the things that happen. So for example, when he or she calls you 10, 12 times in a row, right? Now, granted, we've all done it, right? I'm 45, so I'm not gonna sit here and act like in my lifetime that never happened. The telltale sign is when you get to your phone and you have all those missed calls. What does your heart and stomach do? Because at that point, if you look at your phone and your heart drops and your stomach is turning, there's a problem.
Right.
Because now you're anxious or afraid of what is about to happen next. That is a telltale sign that something is wrong. If you have a problem with your significant other and you are afraid to address it, or you call 17 people trying to get an example of how to say it,
right,
that's a problem, right? So instead of giving you symptoms that you can look up on Google, right. I want to encourage you all to be aware of how you are feeling and what you're experiencing in the moment when you're with someone who may be abusing you. And most times your gut tells you something is wrong. This is uncomfortable. I'm afraid. I'm scared. If you're always second guessing yourself, period, right? If you have to call other people and say, did this make sense to you, or did I do that right, or what you think about this, right? That's a problem. That's a problem.
Yeah. So we went over the various layers of the person who the symptoms or signs of the person who was coming out of an abusive relationship. But is it easily identifiable for like the mindset of an abuser? Like, let's talk about identifying the mindset of an abuser. And before I get into part 2 of that question, how do we do so?
So if I'm hearing the question correctly, are we saying, does the abuser, his or herself, understand that he or she is an abuser, or are we saying it from the perspective of us looking at the person who's being abused?
From the perspective of us looking at the abuser, and not just the person who's in a relationship with the abuser, but just even general on the outside, recognizing that in general,
right?
So so we're not in the relationship with the abuser, but we see someone is in a relationship with someone who's abusive.
Correct.
And you're asking me what that looks like.
Yes. Like how do you identify? I guess similar question to the symptoms of the person who's in an abusive relationship. but just in reverse. Like someone, I guess, I don't know if this obviously is not a clinical term, but like what would we call them? Red flags and stuff like that. Although, so go ahead, Jay.
I was going to say, so for me, the question came from a place of presumption, right? We go back to one of the side conversations we had before we started recording was that one of the things that sparked us to have this conversation about physical abuse or domestic abuse of any form was like the whole publicized, one of the several cases with the whole publicized Meg Thee Stallion thing. And one of the presumptions that I made was like, and we'll get into a little bit with the narcissism thing, but it's like, does at any point the abuser look at the victim or are victims of abuse viewed by their, abuser as just like property or not really a person? Or is there, like, how are they viewing that person or that individual? Because I felt like in order for a person to be, like, continue, like, there was, like, an indifference to the well-being of the victim, which for me would almost view that person as, like, not even human, like an objective. Now, that was a presumption that I made. That could either be a true presumption I'd like for you to expound on from a professional viewpoint, or maybe say, no, that's an incorrect presumption. Here's kind of how it really looks, and kind of share what that was.
So I'm smiling because when I think about this term narcissist that a lot of people throw around, right? The textbook definition of a person who has narcissistic personality disorder, would be, a whole lot of other descriptions, and then they lack empathy, which is what you were describing, right? They lack the ability to look at someone else and actually feel anything for them, right? So do they look at them as property? Maybe, right? But bigger than anything is the lack of empathy. So we're gonna scale that back a minute and talk about abuse. Abuse most of the time comes from a sense of wanting to control. And they don't feel like they have control in other ways. And so I'm going to dominate you, right? I'm going to dominate you emotionally, mentally, psychologically, financially. We very rarely talk about that, but then physically. So it really comes from a sense of inadequacy, right? And so my only way to really truly keep this person here is to control them in some way, right? And so that's really where abuse stems from. They have a lot of inadequacies, a lot of insecurities, and thus I feel like I need to dominate you in some way, if that makes sense. So however that looks for them, and whatever path they choose to control you in, that's really what the ultimate goal is to control you. I need to control your mind. I need to control your actions, your thoughts. I need to control you, so that now I got you. You're not going anywhere.
So you kind of fell into the very next question. So if I'm hearing you correctly, it's a lot of similarities between the abuser and the narcissist.
A lot of similarities.
So let's expound on that.
Mm-hmm.
Because
so there are narcissists that won't necessarily abuse, right? And then there are abusers that I'll say this. Believe it or not, we all have some traits of narcissism, right? So, for example, one of the symptoms of narcissism is inflated self-esteem, right? So when you think about professional athletes, do they not have inflated self-esteem? Do they not believe that they're going to go on this field or this court and dominate?
And rightfully so,
right,
because they've been told since they were 8 years old.
And they need to think that, right? Depending on, if you're out there playing football, you can't go out there being scared. Like, you have to believe that I'm going to dominate you, right? So literally part of the reason I say that is really dangerous for people to look at symptoms, because when you start looking at the symptoms in isolation, you may misinterpret, right? So someone can be self-confident, overly confident, right? There are people who can believe that they're better than you on some level. I'm smarter than you on some level, which is probably true on some level, right? So, what we look at from a clinical standpoint when you talk about someone who's narcissistic is we look at the first thing I want you all to hear is patterns of behavior, right? So, someone who is truly a narcissist, they're not just a narcissist at home. They're not just a narcissist in this relationship. They're a narcissist everywhere. That means that they have issues at work. You know, they have issues at church. I mean, whatever setting you name, there's issues. You know,
Yeah, because it's not to be misconstrued with overconfidence. You know what I'm saying? Really quickly, I'm sorry. I saw a clip the other day that blew my mind. And this gentleman was talking about humility versus narcissism, right? And he was like, we teach our children, because we don't do the research to bear to know the reason, the meanings. We teach our children to be humble when we really should be teaching them to be a narcissist because of the confidence level that you just said, right? But that's people that buffet information, right? They just take what they want from it. You understand what I'm saying? Because if you read the rest of the definition, it's at any cost of putting yourself first in every facet of life.
And above
you understand what I'm
else.
saying? And above someone else.
So like you asked me about Deion Sanders, Coach Prime. You know, he has a saying, don't let my confidence offend your insecurities, right? And so the thing about it is I was just talking to my son about confidence, right? And I said, when you have two really, truly, genuinely confident people, they don't get offended by the other person's confidence, right? So I can take that and I can actually use it to make me better because I know that there are certain aspects of what I do and who I am, that look different than you, right? So again, it comes. So I really truly despise this new age of life coaching and all these people on social media that want to try to educate people psychologically because there's a lot of misinformation out there. We do not, and I repeat, we do not want to teach our kids to be narcissists, right? We do want to teach them to have certain symptoms or certain traits of narcissists, right? Because we all have it, right? So self-confidence,
yes.
right? The belief, self-efficacy is actually your belief in your ability to do something, right? So I actually believe that I can do this and I can do this well. We definitely want to teach that, but not at the expense of someone else because your confidence does not ever really truly need to be at the expense of someone else, or that's no longer confidence. Because for me, my question is going to be, who are you trying to convince, right? So if I have to now step on you and I have to now beat you down to show your dominance, then you're not confident
at all.
That's
all.
insecurity,
Right. So that's how
insecurity,
you
mass singer.
Right. And if you really want to know if someone is confident or if they just blowing smoke up your ass, when they are going out of their way to convince you, right?
That's right.
Because confidence is a movement. Like I always say, Coach Prime, he says it's a scent.
Right.
I don't wear cologne.
Yeah,
I smell
that's confidence.
Look good,
exactly.
look good, smell good, play good.
Right, feel good, play
That
good.
used to be his. That's what he used to be his.
And so
feel good. Sorry.
you will know the difference because I don't have to walk in the room and I don't have to give you my resume and I don't have to tell you this. I don't have to tell you that, right? Because I sit at the table and you feel it. And so that there's a huge difference between someone trying to make you believe they're confident and someone who really truly is.
No, I've always said that. Like at some point, you're not trying to tell us. You're trying to convince
yourself.
You're trying to convince yourself, and we're your audience while you do it. And I think you touched on another thing that I'd like to just kind of tout the show on with. Me personally, I've always, especially since the pandemic, had an issue with all these social media, random therapists, life coaches, confident influencer people. But that was the beauty of having you on the show as a professional. With truth, no chase. Everybody's got an opinion, and everybody has. And if you're not aware or if you're not careful, some of these folks' opinions will sound like education, and you'll take it and you'll input misguidance in your life. So the importance of us having someone who can bring the truth and giving information to people that they could actually use, that is from a professional place of expertise, is really huge.
Yes.
And so I use the example, so it's like if you decide to go get a BBL in Panama, right?
Oh.
You gambling, right?
Yeah.
And there's really no repercussion, right? You decided to go to that hotel room and bend over and let them inject you with
Black
these
market.
shots. So whatever you get from that is what you get from it, right? When you go to a professional, there's actually recourse if something goes wrong.
Yes.
Right. So not that I'm trying to put myself out there, but if I truly do something erroneous, right, and I truly inflict harm, there is a governing body that I sit up under that you now can go to get some type of recourse.
Yeah.
And that's really, really important, because you have a lot of people out here spouting opinions and reading things and giving you their interpretation of it. And if you so choose to listen, do so proceed with caution, because again, that's the challenge you're taking. You're going to get a BBL in Panama.
And here's the thing: just because
Proceed
they
with
pretty,
caution.
just because they pretty, that don't make them right. Just because they handsome,
analogy.
that don't make them right.
And just
Just
because
because
they
they
look
popular-
good at first, like I really want to make, because when
'Cause-
you come back from Panama, you popping, right? Your butt is you looking good, and in about 6 months, it starts to slump.
I'm
Right?
so happy you said that, Jay.
No, but no.
I'm so happy you said that, because those factors do alter people's perceptions.
Right,
They
yeah.
alter people's perceptions. They,
Big time.
Yeah.
Oh,
like
they
it's-
pretty, they must be right. Oh, they're
Right.
handsome, they must be right.
absolutely.
Oh, they're popular, they have a big following. And that's not just in this
Yeah.
confidence
Anything,
or
it's
life coach,
everything.
like with political opinions, with
anything,
everything.
yeah.
They popular, what he said or what she said, let's all go with that. Because they got 9 million followers. Now I'm going to adopt that into their brain. It's like,
It's a cult.
yeah, I mean,
It's a
but
cult mentality.
it's a followers.
So
mentality.
I know you don't want to harp on it, because I heard you before the show. You don't
Yeah.
want to harp on the narcissist. I just got one last question though. So we did like it wasn't an icebreaker. It was one of those kind of, what do you call those? When you try to get people together in the job and do those little. Not potluck.
No, it is icebreaker.
It is an icebreaker.
Kind of ice.
Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah,
it's
it's
icebreaker.
icebreaker. It's
Just
icebreaker.
different
Okay,
form.
icebreaker.
Yeah.
What is it? Team building.
Two
There you go.
said-
Team building. Right. So he did one of those little team building projects at work, and
Tip in the background.
each direction represented the type of worker you were, right? And North was the overly competitive. Do you consider that a symptom of narcissism? The overly competitive.
I think I definitely think it can be a symptom, but it doesn't meet the
Because
criteria.
you said we all have traits.
So
Yeah.
let me. I'm glad you said that. Just because we have symptoms of something, that doesn't mean we meet the criteria for a diagnosis. So, for example, let's take it out of the realm of narcissism.
Oh, wow.
Let's talk
Okay.
about depression.
You say that again? Cause,
Yeah.
Because
That
I
was
want
a
to
gem.
tweet that.
That was a gem.
Just because we exhibit or experience symptoms of something doesn't mean we reach the level of a diagnosis, right? So, for example, depression. I would argue that everyone has felt sad at some point in life,
Right.
I would argue that everyone has experienced low energy, right? I would argue that everybody has experienced times where they just didn't feel like doing the things that they used to want to do, right? That doesn't necessarily mean that you're clinically depressed.
Right.
Right? And
Uh-huh.
so that's the thing. We can have symptoms of something, right? Doesn't necessarily mean that I reached the clinical diagnosis of something. So that's where we go wrong, is that you start to look. That's why I didn't really want to. It's not that I didn't want to tackle narcissism. I didn't want to go into symptoms, because we get so caught up in these checklists, right? And again, you can have symptoms of something, but what we look for in the clinical world is, how does this impact you in multi-facets of your life? Is it a persistent pattern? Meaning, does it continue to happen in multiple areas of your life? I was talking to a teenager, and I told her, I said, if you meet a man who can't never keep the same boys, right? Every time you turn around, something went down with him in this group of boys, and he got a new set of friends every 6 months. There's a problem. right? It's before we even get to the romantic relationship, he can't keep friends. It's all, and when it's always somebody else's fault, like there's a problem. When you at home and your spouse or your significant other comes home, and every time they complain,
what about a boyfriend? Person can't keep the boyfriend is always their fault.
Significant other, right? Comes home and it's always
Speak
somebody at the office's fault. Right? They can't never see the part they played in it. Problem, right? So again, we look at patterns of behavior. Mean a pattern is not just this one area. It's happening in multiple areas at the same time. Because again, what'll happen is 5 years ago this person had a problem at work, and then 2 years later they got a problem at home. Like that's not that's not a pattern per se. We're looking at the same time in this 6-month period. Did they have problems at home, at work, with the kids, with their friends, with the neighbors, with everybody, right? So now that's 5 red flags right there. That this person has a problem with everybody, right?
I want to get back. No,
People-
I feel like
people
Frank-
Listen.
Tim said wrap it up soon, but I cannot. No, boyfriend, you looked at me and said, "Does that mean
I
boyfriends?"
didn't even look at you.
Yeah. Oh, you did, and so did Jay.
No, I was on some other stuff.
Okay,
But I want to. So hold on. I want to address that, right? I want to address that.
No,
So when people talk about, when they look at patterns of relationships, right? So every time this person gets in a relationship,
What's his name?
right? It starts to sound real similar. What I would say is their picker is off, which means their ability to actually choose a significant other that's healthy is messed up, right? Because if you really take the time and look at it, that individual more than likely is choosing the same person. They just look different, right? And so again, but what happens psychologically is now I start to somehow attribute it to something that I'm lacking or I'm missing or I'm not doing, when in essence it's something that you are doing, which means I am choosing unhealthy people. Right? And I keep choosing unhealthy people. And so if you're working with me, that's what we're going to focus on. We're not going to focus on him or her. And we're going to focus on you.
Because that's what you said at the beginning of the show.
What is it about you that
you
continues to connect with these unhealthy people?
Because you said that to one of your clients at the beginning. I'm a good listener. So you said that to one of your clients at the beginning of the show. You said that. You said, what is it about you? That we need to get. Cause you said that Hey, listen. Okay, so let's stop talking about him. What is it about you that needs to stay?
Right.
Okay. I thought I heard that right.
So for me,
I feel like all this shade is coming towards me, Frank. I'm about to take your
even-
husband out right about now.
And I just want to
shade is
say,
coming my
So-
way.
so for me-
when I
even
made
look
that, hold on, just a caveat. When
I
I
need a
made
refill.
that statement, I was not referring
I'm
to
feeling depressed.
anybody
I'm feeling
in the
depressed and
building.
anxiety right now.
Oh, now you
No,
got depression.
no, no.
Oh, now you diagnosed with depression now. Oh my goodness.
No. So for me, when what ticked me about that is when people in general, even outside of romantic relationships, who are constantly falling out with people, right? And with me, what made me trigger is like you got people. I actually had a conversation about this with Ashley like a long time ago. Is when like people fall out with people, they constantly fall out, and now the new excuse is to fall out with people and then post about how some people just don't have a place in your life. So it seemed like 12 people over the last 2 months ain't had a place in your life. Some people ain't meant to be in your life, and some people are just like, no, you should. If you like, how many toxic
Dr.
people are
G.
you running
Dr. G.
across?
Yes.
Dr. G.
Yes.
Dr. G.
But
You said
anyway.
you
It could be you.
You said you are a great person.
I'm
Very few things, and I told you
Very
I'm a
few
good
things are
listener.
black and white.
I told you I'm a good listener. Very few things are black and white. You said universally, 1 + 1 gonna be 2 everywhere.
Everywhere.
You know what else universal?
What?
The common denominator. All right. So I mean, I'm just putting that out there. I
take
ain't.
my headphones off and exit the show.
I'm not pointing. I'm not
Frank
pointing.
is trying to-
So I'm
intentional.
inclined,
I ain't pointing
am
no
inclined-
elbows at nobody.
Listen, I am inclined
But-
to agree with you. What I will say is, and what I really want people to avoid doing, right,
go
is
ahead.
avoid attributing that you may be the common denominator, right? Avoid attributing that to mean that there is something wrong with you as opposed to something wrong with your choices, because that's two different things, right? And so again, it's about self-awareness and understanding what is it about. So some self-disclosure. Years ago, I because I actually have ADHD, so I struggle with being neat. If you ever seen my car, it's like, oh my God, I don't know. I can, my niece came over and cleaned up my closet, and a week later she was like, Auntie Sandy, like, this is unacceptable, right? So for me, that's a huge struggle. All my life is I lose everything, right? And so for me, I felt like that wasn't a really a great quality as a woman, because men look for women that are, very organized, women who can take care of the home, that clean, and that's not me. And so I thought that if I dated men who also had something wrong with them, then my stuff doesn't look as bad. And that couldn't be the more unhealthy if I made up a scenario, because actually that it doesn't work like that. But because of my deep-seated insecurities about that part of me, I chose men who I felt would be more likely to accept it because of whatever they had going on, right? So for me, I had to take a step back, and I really had to clean that up. I had to not just say that I was okay with it, but truly get to a place where, just like I'm Black, I'm disorganized. Like, I had to own it in that way, so that when I did decide to date again, now I'm not dating from a place of deficit or insecurity, right? But I'm dating from a place of understanding who I am, and if you are not okay with that, then I'm not okay with you. And that took some time to get to, but it started with me recognizing what my pattern of choosing was.
It took some time. Say it again. It took some. Say it again.
It
please.
took some time to get there, but part of it is you have to be ready to take a look. You got to get sick and tired, right? Like, I'm tired of dating the same men. I'm tired of being in the same situation. So at some point, I do have to look at the common denominator, which is me.
Yes.
So what is it about me? No, it's not because you have ADHD. It's because of whatever interpretation you've made about it, and now you don't feel like, because you don't accept it, you don't feel like they will, right? So again, my picker was off. I'm choosing people for the wrong reason.
And then let's be clear. Let's just talk about the obvious. Just because you go out there with a good squad don't mean you're going to win the game.
That's
right. So you can make the right choice. You can make the pick. That doesn't guarantee things are going to work out.
It doesn't. The best, I told my niece this. I said, the best thing sometimes people can do is, once they see that something has become unhealthy, leave. Right? Because you're not always going to know. There's no, I wish there was something I could tell you all that would prevent you from being in an unhealthy relationship, but there isn't, right? The best thing you can do sometimes for yourself is be willing to walk away. And that is, to me, the true sign of I love me, is because I'm not going to let you do me like this. I'm not going to let you, abuse me, beat up on me, tear me down. So I'm going to walk away.
So because I forget about you. So just how somebody can still be healing and still be happy, or broken and still healing at the same time. So is it possible for somebody's picker to be off, but recognize that they need some changing to do and are willing to do the work?
Absolutely. And I'm going to be honest, in those situations.
Point the camera to him. Thank you.
So in those situations, it would be my clinical opinion that that person is not relationship material just yet, right? And I think we need to normalize people being okay with not being relationship material. It comes off like a negative connotation, but really, I'm doing you a service by saying that I'm not going to engage with you because I know I'm not ready, right? Like, to me, that's one of the biggest compliments you can give somebody, because I'm not going to take you through this crazy journey that this ride that I know I'm on, because it's unfair to you. Right. So I think the biggest thing that you can do for yourself and someone else is recognize that right now I'm not relationship material, because I'm still working through some stuff.
So, a lot of this is poking fun. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Because, just this truth, no chasers, living in our truths.
Absolutely.
You understand what I'm saying? So
I'm just here to do a podcast.
Me living in my truth, that's my narcissistic trait kicking in, because I actually like some of these niggas. You know what I'm saying? So that's just me putting with something. So that's right. That's
as we say.
I'm so glad you said that.
Truth no chaser.
So one of the things I say to people all the time, I say God could send you the man or the woman that He designed specifically for you, and you will still muck it up. Why? Because you're not ready. So to your point, you actually like some of the niggas that she or he or whoever is dating.
You talking about me?
But because they aren't in a space to really receive this relationship, they'll muck it up.
But see, also, so just speaking for me, because he's talking about me, truth no chaser, transparency.
How dare you speak for yourself?
Right? How dare I speak for myself? Because I feel like the shade was.
I mean, they didn't have to know that I was talking about.
Even attempts to wrap it up, but I got to speak this because I get what he's saying, right? And I agree. And I said before I wanted to actually have a show where women are real because I realized while I was dating, you know what I'm saying, I realized I was a red flag. I was toxic. I know that. And I still have work to do. But what he's talking about, some of the guys I brought around, which I'm stopped doing, is it's not just me though, right? Like as you said, it's healthy because not calling nobody out, whatever. Obviously, no, because I wouldn't call nobody out. But I'm able to recognize, at times I was a red flag. I was toxic. I get this, but also now because I'm working on me and doing self-awareness, I can see that some of the guys I was attracted to because of the old way I was thinking. Once I get around them and see them, no, this ain't gonna work because I can recognize, for me it doesn't flow with me. So although he liked them as, that's the homie or he's cool, with me, it's totally different. It's two different people. And what I was seeing or whatever I may bring about from them, whatever, it wasn't going to work for Ashley because I know where I want to go now and what I see now and who I am. I recognize who I am now as a woman. Before I didn't know. So all the bullshit would fly. Now, So, sorry, Frankie, you liked them, but, and then Wonder really did like whatever, but it was like emotionally, he said, I'm not ready. Yeah. And as much as I liked him, I can't accept that.
And I would just say this to that. One of the things I frequently talk about is the difference between your gut and your trauma, right? Because both feel the same, right? Like so because of what I've been through, I'm now feeling a way, right? Now, is this real? Is this really my gut telling me to run, or is this my trauma telling me to run? And that's really hard to differentiate between.
Yeah, I need more work. I know that. Okay. So before we get up out here and wrap it up, in your professional opinion, where can abusers? Do abusers really identify themselves as abusers? Did they call themselves an abuser? I'm sorry.
They do not. So that's the thing about an abuser.
I was getting ready to say that. Yeah.
They don't actually think.
Especially if they narcissistic with personality.
I'm an abuser.
Especially with
they're not going to say that.
Hi, I'm an abuser, and I
because
need.
Again,
especially if they narcissistic with personality.
They're not going to say so I can't even.
That's part of a classic symptom is that you don't think that there is anything wrong, right? Like you really truly don't. So an abuser is not going to wake up one morning and say, dang, I'm an abuser. Like that's just not gonna happen.
Right. The abuser is more like y'all don't hit your women.
Listen, right.
You don't hit your girl, bro.
That's crazy.
What?
Yeah, like that's your problem.
Like shit, what's wrong with you? You can try it out.
And I'll tell you, most times they're not gonna seek help unless it's court appointed. Like unless I'm gonna be real honest. Like even if you leave, they're just gonna go on to the next person. So unless it gets to a point where I'm serving some time or I'm serving some time and he said I got to, right. I'm not.
That's not funny, but it's so funny because
it's true.
That's the
it's
only
true,
way
though.
you can seek help is if it's court
it's gonna be
because there's something wrong with it.
Mandated.
So those who are watching now and listening, if you have come across anything she's talked about today, may have been joking about, but it's all in seriousness. The goal is to bring awareness because we know it happens every day. Absolutely. I mean, your friend, your mother, you, cousin, somebody is going through this right now. So if you see any symptoms or any signs or any red flags, where can somebody who is seek help from, or where can somebody direct somebody who they know is going through this right now? Where should they go to?
So I'm gonna address it in different factors. Yeah. So if you are the friend or the family member of someone who you think is being abused, as hard as it may be for you, right? And it is hard. I want to strongly encourage you to stay in there with them, right? Because again, they need to know that there's someone else out there
Yeah.
that they can turn to if and when they finally make the decision to leave, right? But if they have burned every bridge, they're more likely to stay a whole lot longer, right? So if you are the supporter, if you are the friend, the family member, the coworker, or whomever it is, for as much as you can tolerate it, please don't turn your back on that person. You're going to get frustrated. Yes. You're going to be angry. Yes. You might even say some stuff that you know out of anger. But I strongly encourage you to stick it through. And the other thing I would encourage you to do is document, right? So a lot of times what happens is I have to be careful how I say this. So it's not that I'm trying to teach anybody how to get away with anything, right? But what I will say is, if it's not documented, it didn't happen, right? And so a lot of times when things go to court, if that person wasn't calling 911, if the police wasn't coming out, if there was no record of it, then it puts the judge and the jury in a very, peculiar predicament, right? Yet if this person, can stand up, this coworker says that she came to work 2 out of 5 times for the last 6 months with something wrong, right? When you start documenting it, then you actually are in support of this person as well, right? So that's another thing that you can do as a supporter when you feel helpless, right? Just document the conversations. If you do nothing else, take out your phone and put the date that y'all had the conversation and what was talked about during that conversation, right? I'm really big on screen save. I screen save text messages. I tell people, hey, text me something. Because trust me, I'm screenshotting it and I'm saving it, right? So sometimes when we feel helpless, doing those things could be everything, right? Because you're really helping this individual possibly build a case later on, right? So for as much as you can, try not to just totally turn your back on them, and document, right? So if you are the person that's in the abusive relationship, telltale signs is you just feel very uncomfortable. You feel anxious all the time. You feel scared. People are starting to tell you that something's different about you. You're not yourself. You notice that when I'm in this environment, I feel lax and free, and I can laugh and I can be myself. But then when I'm in this environment, not so much. So start looking at differences, right? Because so a lot of times when you look at, your brain is programmed to look for similarities, right? But it's the differences that tell the story. So, for example, when babies first learn about doggies, right? Doggy, doggy, doggy. Then when they see a cat, what do they say? It's a dog. Why? Because a cat has 4 legs, it has a tail, it has fur. It's not until we start to tell them or show them the difference between the dog and the cat that they understand the difference. Or some parents, we convince all our kids that everything is chicken to get them to eat it, right? Because, again, our brain is programmed to look for the things that are the same. The differences tell the story. So if you're in a situation and you start to feel different, something is different about this individual, right? That's a red flag. I'm different when I'm with this individual, right? I don't feel heard. I feel frequently misunderstood. I feel like, I have to tiptoe with how I say things. I have to, question everybody and ask everybody about what I'm thinking and what I'm feeling and did I do it right, right? Those are all signs that this is unhealthy, right? And I'm not really going to address the abuser because, like I said, they don't get it. They truly don't get it until they're made to get it. And sometimes they will. And then I've known people to go through the process and still come out and do the exact same thing, right? But I really want everybody to understand this. Domestic violence is a really difficult thing to understand. And if you don't remember anything I said tonight, remember this. We tend to do what's easy, right? So if it's easy, we do it. If they're not doing it, understand that it must not be easy to them. It's not that simple. And so part of you being able to show compassion and empathy is for you to take a step back and say, it must not be that easy for you, right? Mm-hmm. And so how can I be helpful because we tend to want to help people the way we want to help them, and not necessarily the way they need to be helped.
Yes. But definitely a lot to unfold here, and I'm happy that we were able to hone in on that. Like, just to reiterate, what Ashley was saying, definitely didn't want to make it seem like we were making light of this. Right. Yeah. For anybody that may misconstrue that. Yeah. So. And
I want people to understand when it comes to things. Sometimes and we have to laugh to keep from crying, right? Sometimes we have to lighten it up just a little bit, because if not, it's too heavy to carry.
It's tense,
right?
Yeah.
And so it's similar. I work with police and fire, and so sometimes after a very traumatic event, they'll kind of the way they describe what just happened, or somebody who just got burned up, may seem really inappropriate, right? But it's their way of lightening something that was very, very traumatic, so that they can go on and live. So if you hear us laughing about it, it's in no way to say that this is not serious or it's a joke. More so than it actually is very serious and can be very heavy, and yet we have to still find a way to get through it. And most of us connect on laughter, right? So I look at it as just a way to connect.
Well, Dr. G, we appreciate you joining us tonight.
Yes.
Just to recap everyone with all the wonderful information that you have shared with us. We talked about first the effects of adults who were raised in abusive homes. One of the things that you educated and so on, it's not necessarily about connecting the dots and focusing on what a symptom is, but also focusing on how you feel in a relationship, what comes out of the relationship, and the pattern of behaviors, not just within a relationship, within the person and then outside of the relationship. We also talked about some of the things that when we say, why do people repeat the cycle? Some of the reasons why folks repeat the cycle is what they're used to, what their body even admits, learning that it's even can be physical, not just psychological, physiological, how your body responds to certain environments. So please, everyone, go back and listen to that show, that part of the show. That's something that you don't hear quite often. And then we talked about, okay, so what are some examples of how to break the cycle? We often focus on what are the patterns of abuse or what's in the abuser, but Dr. G taught us tonight to really to address the answer to that question, to take an introspective look at ourselves, how we respond to certain situations, what our patterns are, fixing ourselves, and also making sure going to seek help, seek therapy, because one of the next things was, okay, if we want to focus on breaking the cycle, how do we in fact break that cycle? It's hard for the abuser to break it for themselves. Like she said, we joked about it, but it's kind of true. Unless it's scored a point and the abuser really doesn't really show up and say, I'm an abuser, help me out. But for those of us who are in abusive relationships and others who are in abuse, know of others who are in abusive relationships, if you're in an abusive relationship, recognize those patterns. First, take introspective look at yourself, your responses to situations, how you feel. I loved how she used the example of, you go to your phone, you see 10, 12 missed calls, does your heart drop, does your heart sink? Pay attention to those things. And if you're in support of someone who is in an abusive situation, try your best to continue to love on that person and be patient and not abandon them. And not only can you do that, help save them psychologically and physically, and help them separate from the abuse, because you can be a record keeper, you can be a person that documents the things. And then we also touched on the effects of narcissism, the relationship between narcissism and abuse. We talked a lot about that, and we learned that we throw around the term narcissism, but there's more to it than some of the things that we pick apart. It's about a pattern of behavior, as it is with anything. Seeing if that person's a narcissist, not only in that relationship or in that environment, but at work or everywhere else. And also a key thing she pointed out, one particular symptom isn't necessarily evidence to diagnose a person with the whole thing. And then backing all the way out of it, the answer still is always therapy, but from a licensed professional. Sure, you can change your own brakes, but when you change your own brakes, number one, you just learned how to do it yesterday versus someone who's been in practice and who has a governing body that they have to adhere to and answer to. And then there's with that governing body, there's a system of accountability that goes against research and everything that is right, and guiding you to the help that you need. So we thank you again, Dr. G, for joining us. And Frankie, tell them how to keep up with Truth No Chaser.
Yes, thank you, Jay. Very well said.
Right,
so,
broke it down so it's forever been broken.
Yes, absolutely. So definitely if you want to just keep in tune with Truth No Chaser the brand. You can visit us at Instagram at truth_no_chaser. Our very own Ashley Cochran keeps that popping. You can also visit us at our website at thetruthnochaser.com. Again, that's thetruthnochaser.com for upcoming shows, past shows, upcoming events, merch, and so much more.
For the visual version of this podcast, please check us out at youtube.com/The Truth No Chaser. That's youtube.com/The Truth No Chaser. And you can find those visual links also on the website.
And before I close it out, as I always do, Dr. G, can you let people know where they can find you at if they want to seek out your help?
Yes. So one of the easiest ways to reach out to me would be probably via email. That's Dr. Govan, DRGOV, as in Victor, AN, at...
You went blank.
I literally just went blank. At thecoachingclinic.care. At thecoachingclinic.care. You can also reach me at 678-685-1374, 678-6851 Dr. G.
Until next time, keep walking in your truth, Black people.